65 pole positions, 41 Grand Prix wins, world champion in 88, 90 and 91. He was awarded every accolade in the sport, including that of the greatest driver of his generation. A lot is known about his achievements, but it's hard to comprehend the single-minded dedication that took him to the top. It made him a millionaire many times over. It made him the hero that Brazilians were desperate for. Self-confident, self-absorbed, and there'd be times in his Grand Prix career when he'd show a reckless self-belief behind the wheel. 10 years ago, Formula One had clearly found its new star. Toleman provided his entry point into Grand Prix racing. Lotus provided the breakthrough. In 1985, a supreme victory in the wet of Estoril. But many wins on British racetracks had gone before as the young Brazilian progressed through the junior categories of Formula Ford and Formula 3.
I remember when I first met him, it was in the race at Nürburgring when they had all these new Mercedes and they had all drivers you could think of, Fangio and Brabham. I mean, everybody was there from Australia and from America and so on. And who won it? A guy I'd never heard of, like this man called Senna. And I said, well, what's he do? And somebody said, well, he's in Formula Ford or whatever. I can't remember what it was now. And yet he started there, and from that moment he just continued to rise until, of course, he got to where he was, a position that is, in my opinion, only equal, probably, maybe by Fangio.
Just 22-year-old, and there is plenty of time to get Formula One if I will get there. Cannot be sounding true, but I start with 4 years old in go-kart. My father made a special one, very small obviously, and up to 13 years old I was just going around, practicing. I enjoy very much, always motor racing. Last year was my first season in cars, in single-seaters. I never tried before.
It's too cold for him over here. That was the main problem. He would never really get out of bed till lunchtime to test. And then he refused to actually go out until his gloves were put on the radiators to warm them up. He'd had a lot of grounding in karts. He had his first kart when he was 4.5. His father bought him. And it was just easy for him. He could come into the pits at any time and say that the right-hand front tyre needed a pound more pressure. He didn't have to worry about the steering wheel and the gear lever and stuff that a lot of other people have to worry about.
Well, on top of the results he was piling up almost every weekend, he was a very motivated young man, a bit different to his colleagues of a similar age. He lived in the Reading area at that time, which meant he was only about 5 or 8 miles from my home. So I think my wife and I took him out for dinner half a dozen times in 1983, tried to make him feel a bit more at home in that part of the world. And in our conversations, which I think tended to make my wife a little bit bored, it was only about motor racing, it came across how intense he was about his career.
British motorsport first saw Senna involved in intense competition in 1983. His rivalry with the young Martin Brundle making the British Formula 3 Championship that year a classic. Brundle went well in the second half of the season, but Senna had dominated the first half with a record 9 straight wins.
Ayrton's a bit of an exception. If he hadn't have been here this year, I'd be looking rather good at the moment, having won 7 or 8 races.
Lap 15 completed into lap 16, and the monotonously, almost boringly successful Ayrton Senna from Brazil is, as we are used to seeing him, very much in the lead on this, the 16th lap in the 20-lap Formula 3 Championship round 5. And struggling along in his wake as ever, very successfully but not successfully enough, is the ever hard-trying Martin Brundle in the blue Eddie Jordan wrought Toyota. There he is.
I learned from the Formula 3 days, particularly the colour of his crash helmet was very bright colour scheme. And he took no prisoners whatsoever. You could clearly see him coming up behind you, and he very often left you to decide whether or not you were going to have an accident with him. He put his car in a position to overtake you, and it happened to me in Formula 3 many times, and we did have many accidents because I wouldn't let him through.
And when he came to us, Martin was one of those drivers who needed a degree of help in terms of, he always kept telling himself, and we kept telling him, Martin, you can take him. At this stage, obviously, no one realised how good that Senna was going to be. So it was easier to accept it. There was no, if you like, big reputation about it. Here was just another Brazilian who was obviously going to be good, but not to the level that we now know.
Eu vim esperando há muito tempo. E ele está me ajudando também muito a ficar calmo.
A significant day, Senna's first drive in a Formula One car, courtesy of Williams, Donington, 1983. Other tests would follow with Tolman, Brabham and McLaren, but this moment was special.
We'd run a lot there with the car that year with our regular drivers, and on lap 11, his first time out in a Grand Prix car, he equalled the best time that car had done in other hands, and on lap 23 he was about a second a lap faster than the car had gone. At that point he came in, stopped and said, I think I've had enough today, I want to go home and think about what I've done, and left.
We were both invited to test a Formula 1 car for McLaren. A magnificent event. It was McLaren number 8, which ironically 10 years later I would race in Formula 1. He drove first, and Stefan Beloff was also there. Sadly, they're both dead now, and myself. And I'll never forget Senna screaming past the pits, blue smoke pouring out of the back. I stood beside Ron Dennis at the time, although he wouldn't know or remember. And Senna just kept his foot in till he passed the point where it was being timing, jumped out and wanted to know what the lap time was because he felt it was his best lap. I very clearly remember Ron Dennis saying, I find it very difficult to press a stopwatch when my car is in flames and pouring smoke out the back. Ayrton. But somehow they put another engine in it, and Ayrton negotiated a second go in the car because we'd all done very, very similar lap times, and of course he went significantly faster with a second opportunity. And it always impressed me how he, at such an early age, had that kind of head on him, that kind of maturity to know what the right thing to do was.
An early marriage was sacrificed to his racing ambitions, and as these progressed, the total support of his parents remained. Through Formula 3, Formula 1 and on to the World Championship title itself, his family and his country remained paramount in his mind. Even in the karting days, the yellow helmet and indeed the driving style were easy to spot, and he was keen that the Brazilian flag should become as familiar on the race circuits and television screens of the world. Maybe even more than Pelé, he'd become Brazil's greatest sporting hero, and certainly its greatest ambassador.
I was born here, and the things I know, as fundamental things of life, I learn here. I learn with my family, with my friends, with my teachers at school, by living day by day, experience the incredible atmosphere that Brazil has got.
Saudade, saudade.
I'm really a fan. I'm very excited. You know who that is? Senna, right?
Hello everybody, everybody have a good time. Somehow, somewhere in the world, you know, our flag goes up. whenever we manage to win or do well. And that is seen by people as a positive thing, as a good thing. And I suppose that counterbalance a little bit to the social problems, the difficulties, and the bad publicity that some of the problems that we have here get outside Brazil.